Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the third edition of Talk to the Print. I'm Shailaja Bajpai, Reader's Editor at ThePrint. Thank you for being with us here this afternoon, all of you, and also a big thank you to all of you who have written in mail to me with your complaints and your congratulations. Please keep writing in. We are here live with you, so please get those questions out today too, to discuss any questions that you may have for us, and also to give you the chance to meet some of our colleagues and perhaps to get to know them better. As most of you know, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has just returned from what is being termed a very successful trip to the United States, a state visit at that, where many agreements were signed on technology, science, and even defense. According to everyone, there was a lot of goodwill at the end of it. You might also remember that he's been to Egypt recently. But coincidentally, something very interesting was happening in Asia, and you must have all read about the Wagner insurrection in Russia, where a private army actually had the temerity to try and challenge President Vladimir Putin. And unfortunately, the war in Ukraine against Russia continues. Now, these are all big, momentous international events, which ThePrint has covered and covered fairly extensively. I would like to remind you that, one of the cornerstones of our agenda at ThePrint has been national security and international relations. So, of course, we did cover it. But sometimes it makes me wonder, and that's why I'm bringing it up this week, how does a small news portal like ThePrint actually do justice to such big events which are actually taking place thousands of miles away from where we are located in Delhi, Washington, New York, Kiev, or Moscow? So how does that work? Now, this is one of the questions I am going to put to my colleague, Praveen Swami. Good afternoon, Praveen. He's our National Security Editor. And I'm also very happy to have with us today Pia Krishnankutty. Pia is our principal correspondent, am I right?
Yes.
Okay, and you must have seen her byline. She reports frequently on India's foreign policy and our relations with the world, right? So they're going to try and answer some of your questions along these lines. To you first, Praveen, the big picture. How do we set about planning something like, let's say, the Modi visit, or then suddenly this insurrection takes place? You're sitting in Delhi. Pia has never heard of an insurrection. Probably, I don't know if she knew the Wagner. And then what happens here?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that thanks to Pia and really smart young colleagues like her, they know and follow the world.
Okay.
Which means we have a very good sense of what's going on. And we're able to bring our readers up to speed very, very quickly.
Right.
With the essential kernel of events.
Okay.
But if I may, I'd like to make 3 points about international affairs.
Yeah.
And the first one of those is good news. Okay. And the good news is that thanks to technology, we're able to be in touch with people even in very distant places. So Pia had done, for example, a stellar job when the Ukraine uprising broke out.
Right.
The war,
yes.
broke out.
Right.
Because she was able to use social media and WhatsApp to be in touch with Indian students who even in the old days of journalists being able to easily fly to distant places simply might not have been possible. Where would you have roamed around Ukrainian small towns
True.
trying to
Find them.
Find people? I'm able, for example, with coverage of Pakistan or Afghanistan, Pakistan would never give a visa to Indian.
To someone like you, certainly not.
To someone like me.
Yeah.
But thanks to tech, Pakistani journalists and Indian journalists are able to talk to each other on a daily basis.
Yeah. So are you telling me? Are you telling me that we are not doing aggregated stories as much as... because that's a question I get asked all the time.
That's the first one. We're doing... if you just read through our stories, I think you'll see that there's more work that goes into it than you might at first glance think.
Right.
The second bit's true, and probably not just true of our newsroom, but true of far bigger and richer newsrooms. There's
Yes.
less and less money being pumped into foreign policy
Right.
coverage.
Right.
For something like The Print, it's probably a stark choice between do I do 3 stories from rural Uttar Pradesh or send someone off to Kiev, and that too to compete with the big international wire services or TV stations who can bring dozens of correspondents to bear on the ground
Right.
very quickly. I mean, translators, resources, and of course, very, very soon, when all our wonderful readers are paying for subscriptions and so, this will change.
Yes.
But right now, it's a very real
Yeah.
and difficult choice. We
Right.
have newsrooms shutting down all over the world.
Yeah.
The third point I'd like to make also is that while this lack of presence on the ground is a problem, there's aggregation and then there's aggregation. And there's aggregation which is just putting together what you see on the wires.
String of,
this happened, that
Yeah.
happened, this
Yeah.
was on the BBC, that
Yeah,
was
yeah,
in
yeah,
CNN,
yeah.
whatever. And there's aggregation where people apply their mind and are able to analyze what's going on, unpick the news.
Right, right.
And I think some of the reporters we have at The Print
Yes.
are exceptionally talented at bringing context, understanding, and depth to these stories.
Right.
So, 2 pats on the back for us,
Yeah.
and 1 we will pat ourselves when we're a little bit
better. I should also remind all of you that actually we do also subscribe to the Reuters, right?
Yes.
So we are bringing you that additional information agency, which I don't think all the others have, but we do. If you look at our site, you will see a lot of stories from the Reuters. So that's the backup. Pia, to you.
Yes.
Tell me, okay, Ministry of External Affairs, obviously, that's a source of information on what the government is thinking. But how do you only base what we think in India on what the MEA tells us, or do you go further further into academics or experts? What do you do when you're looking at the Indian point of view?
So definitely the MEA is the ministry I cover. I've built sources in the MEA. Let's say with PM Modi's visit,
Right.
okay, we were not physically there, but it's important that I have built that network of sources so
Right.
that they provide us a detailed itinerary with timings, which is so important in terms of time difference.
Right.
So we can track it whether through a live stream, and we know exactly where the PM is going.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, a lot of my sources who were in the MEA
Were there. Yes, quite right.
They were doing press conferences there,
Right.
but luckily those were also live streamed. If you're talking about the beat in general,
Yes, I am.
of course I speak to former MEA officials,
Right.
former foreign secretaries, former
Yeah.
ambassadors.
Right.
I continue to have a robust line of communication with various embassies in Delhi and Chanakya Puri. Just to keep abreast with what even some of these embassies, how they view the Indian foreign policy and how it's developing,
Right.
as well as, India's rise on the global stage.
Yes.
So it's important to keep in touch with them and at least assess the mood from time to time. And of course, they're a great resource for stories as well.
Yeah.
So no, of course, we don't only rely on the MEA.
Right.
We rely on academics, former ambassadors, as I said, in intelligentsia.
Yeah.
And there are also, business councils.
Right.
For example, the US-India Business Council.
Yes.
These business councils are very helpful in writing reports when it comes to trade,
Okay.
even defense.
Right.
Because they also understand, they have their pulse on the industry, or let's say a defense industry, or let's say a certain sector of the economy. So it's good to keep in touch with them as well, so that we know what the private sector feels about Indian foreign policy or trade policy,
Right.
how that's progressing.
Okay, I have now a question from a reader. Thank you, Sankalp. Sankalp asks, geopolitics is complex and in a state of flux. What filters do you use to get a sense of realism? Okay, I'm not quite sure if I understand your question, Sankalp, but I'm going to pass it on to him immediately. Okay, Praveen.
So, I'll maybe caveat that with the note that Shailaja's brother, who's the very eminent international relations theorist Kanti Bajpai, would give me a sort of little bit of a sort of stick on the hand and
Yes.
say nuance realism.
Yeah.
Because there's tons of contestation. We often say that, good analysis of foreign policy are realists. They look at the real interests and pressures involved between countries.
Right.
But realism is also a complicated thing because we look at our interests or we look at national interests through the filters of
Of-
ideology,
yes, yes.
through the historical baggage we bring to a situation. There isn't this sort of magical objectivity that lets us see everything very clearly
Right.
for what it is. So with that little bit of a caveat, I think the thing for journalists is to rely on as diverse a set of information and sources as possible. There's obviously a Ukrainian narrative to what is happening there. There's a Russian narrative.
Yeah.
There's an American narrative. And somewhere in between that, you have to try and unpack what you think is going on. Very, very often, journalists are unable to do that, even if they're right there on the ground. It's not that, in the heat of battle or conflict, somebody knows instantly who is telling the truth.
Yeah, you don't
Which is
ever.
why we'll see journalists often use words like alleged,
That's right.
or this person said, and that person said.
There are a lot of truths colliding, isn't it? Because everyone has their own.
Absolutely. And I think as a reader, the probably smartest thing you can do is when you look at a story, see whether it's telling you more than one point of view,
Yeah.
or whether it's trying to sell you a story. And that's a good way of picking between good reporting and propaganda.
So actually, this leads me to the next question, which comes from Arjun Sudhir, which I'm going to throw open to both of you, who wants to know what open access databases or websites and reading material do you recommend for a national security enthusiast? So recommend what, Pia? You're young, and I'm presuming
Open
Arjun
access
is.
publication.
Yes. Open access databases, websites, and reading material would you recommend for a national security enthusiast? Asking as a big and loyal fan of the videos and writings.
So we
Thank
had
you
done
for that.
some-
Yeah.
We had done some beautiful coverage of the 1962 India-China
Right.
war
Yes.
earlier this year.
Yes.
And our colleagues Raghav Bigchandani and Suchet, who's no longer with us, both of them used a lot of, JSTOR is one example, but also LibGen. There are open access sites like that. A lot of them also dug through thesis papers written by former, let's say, foreign secretaries back in the day when they were studying in, let's say, whatever university they were. So I would say that it depends. With a package like that, when we're covering, let's say, the 1962 India-China war, there's a whole host of information and knowledge that you can access depending on how deep you want to go. We also have another property called, of course, we don't cover it, called Past Forward. There, it's much more of a deep dive. You use a lot of different materials for that type of long form writing. But I would say day to day, we do not use open access as much.
Okay.
Because we're writing on quick developments. I think the deepest I'll go is to maybe consult an expert or a
Right.
former ambassador.
Yes.
Or speak with other people in the newsroom to understand how other beats also see what I'm writing about. But
I should
it depends
tell
on the
you
package.
all who are out there today that this has been, The Print is Pia's first job. And she came to us, what is it now, 5
4
years?
years.
4 years ago. And I can't tell you how remarkably well she has grown into this role. It's been really a wonderful success story to have watched. Thank you, Pia.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
Okay. Do you want to add anything to what she said?
For an enthusiast, someone
Yeah.
who feels that a newspaper or website like The Print isn't giving them as much as they need, there's a bunch of excellent specialist publications around, like Foreign Affairs, like
That's
Foreign
right.
Policy,
Yes.
which give some amount of free content before
Yeah.
the metering
Yeah.
kicks in. If you're a smart young kid, you will also know how to get around a few paywalls, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you because it's
No,
illegal.
we wouldn't want to encourage that.
That at all. But you will know. My advice would be though to access some of the best paywall resources like JSTOR or university libraries. Just get yourself a library membership. I don't know if you're in Delhi or Bombay or some other cities,
Right.
but there's a bunch of really good libraries around. And
Right.
university libraries, even if you're not at that university, I've found in my experience that if you're polite and nice to librarians, they can be extraordinarily helpful. So
Right.
you might want to try that.
Okay. Okay, next question is actually...
If I might add
Sure,
one thing.
sure, of course, please do.
So for my show World 360, I get a lot of people, UPSC aspirants, writing in saying, "Can you please provide us,
Yeah.
sources of information, especially deep dives." Praveen has mentioned a few publications, but also there's a newsletter called Signal, which is very helpful in terms of it'll keep you abreast every day with some of the big developments in foreign policy across the world, maybe not necessarily India, but they do amazing short, pointed, sort of précis on what's happening every day. FinShots is one example for
Right.
financial news.
Yeah.
But Signal I would definitely recommend to our readers
great,
as well.
fine. Okay, so now let's just look at some of the Print's coverage. Now, in what way would you think, what was it that we brought to, let's say, our coverage of the PM Modi visit, that we would say, okay, yeah, this was more unusual. All the news was out there. As you said, it was all live. We could see it, except, of course, the discussions. So what did we look at to do then?
So I would say our strong suit was the analytical pieces we did.
Right.
Also, I will
just give me a few on.
For
analytical
example,
pieces on.
our defense editor, Snehesh Alex Phillip, he did a great story on how what other deals India and US signed during this visit, apart from, of course, the drone deal that a lot of people have heard about and the jet engine deal.
Right.
Those were two that we saw across many headlines. Broadcasters were harping on that quite a bit. But there are other deals as well that, didn't come to light as much. I also did a post visit analytical piece on the trade disputes that India and US decided to terminate. There were 6 trade disputes that were outstanding in the WTO, and a lot of steel manufacturers and steel exporters in India had been waiting for these disputes to be solved, and for all of them to be done in one shot was very significant. I explained that in my piece. And also India lifted some tariffs on certain, food and agricultural products like walnuts and apples that had actually been retaliatory tariffs during the Trump regime. So, did you hear about that? If you as a reader, as a student, if you heard about these trade disputes being solved, kudos to you, but I barely saw it being covered by our national media.
Yeah, I, of course, read it in the print, but no, but I'm not praising us. I'm just telling you the truth.
Yeah, so I think our analytical pieces were definitely great. Even before the visit, we did a lot of videos with experts. I think Praveen did one with a professor from American University, Trisha Bacon. Snehesh did one with Syed Akbaruddin from the Kautilya School of Public Policy. Those were very informative in basically giving our audiences sort of a what can we expect from this visit. Those curtain raisers were very, very helpful, at least for me, someone in the team, to watch. And I thought that was great as
well. I'm glad you've now said this, because one irate reader has just written it saying, I was looking forward to more live video discussions and with experts on the visit as it went along. So why have you disappointed me? Oh dear, I'm so sorry.
We need to send this
that.
reader a list of all of the videos we did.
Well, and I think he's talking about a live show like this. Not have any discussions. Is there something
Jyoti Malhotra did something.
Is there something Praveen, we can look forward to perhaps in the future in expanding our coverage?
I'd love to be doing more live video.
Right.
I think the same constraints we spoke about initially to do with resources apply. I mean, poor Pia already works really long days getting those analytical deep stories out.
Right.
And doing more live including the technical backup it needs, is difficult.
And that is a big constraint, by the way.
But your point is well taken. As our team grows, as our subscription base grows, hopefully we'll be doing more and more live programming, especially around big events like the Prime Minister's visit to the US. That's definitely something that's, I think, on our list. On our list.
There's another question from a reader in which he wants to know that, unfortunately he hasn't identified himself, but please, I would be grateful if all of you would identify yourselves so that we know who's asking us the questions. Thank you. He wants to know that, it's very easy to know the European and the American point of view. You can read the New York Times, Washington Post, you have so much access. All of it comes from the West. But in a situation like, I think that's what you mean, in Ukraine, you're not getting the other side of the story, or are you? The Russian side of the story as much?
I would respectfully disagree.
Okay.
I think the Russians have been extremely good at telling their side of the story.
Right.
There are a bunch of Russian publications, social media feeds, and of course Russian diplomats.
Do we pay enough attention to the Russian point of view?
Well, I think we do. I think we've been quite fair in reporting.
Yes.
I don't think it would be an unfair criticism of Pia or I anyway to say that we're extremely skeptical of the official Russian version.
Right.
But I don't think it would be fair to say either that we uncritically swallow everything the Ukrainians have to say.
And what about what the Indian officials say?
Like
do we take what they say with a pinch of salt, or do we just accept what they say? How far are we led by MEA? Let me put it that way.
Well, India is in a very interesting position with this war, right?
Yes.
And we're clearly in the best of both worlds.
Right.
I would say our Indian foreign minister has been quite brazen on the world stage, if I can use that word, sometimes, to just explain why India shouldn't blindly follow the US. A lot of his one-liners have gone viral on Instagram reels and whatnot of him saying Europe needs to get out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, for example.
Yes.
So I think that sort of trickles down even in the MEA briefings that I attend, where Indian officials seem to be quite proud of the position we're in.
Right.
And I don't think there's anything quite... I think for me, it's good to watch that happen.
Yeah.
Of course, I do take certain things they say with a grain of salt, because we don't know who they're playing to in a certain topic. When it comes to oil, difficult to say what they actually mean.
Right.
When it comes to refining oil, that's a different topic as well. But I will say for a young journalist, it's lovely not lovely, but rather it's quite fascinating to watch how we've been handling this war, and especially our foreign ministry.
If I may just very quickly add to that again, I think the print, we can congratulate ourselves a bit on the fact that, particularly with our opinion and analytic writing, I think we've had people very strongly express themselves on various sides of this debate.
Yes.
And it goes to my point. I think a good, historians of the French Revolution are still debating what happened and why it happened and the rights and wrongs. It's good in a situation like this that we have debate. We have people strongly critical of what our government position is, strongly supportive of it, and that's very
That's
healthy.
good. That's the way it should be, in fact. Okay, now we have a question which actually may be our last one, and but it's nothing to do with our coverage. It's a general question which I think is also fair enough to take. So it says, it's from Aditya. Do you think that in international politics there is no such concept called a group any longer, like they used to say China group, US group, etc., because every country is aligning with each other for their own interests? Do you think the Cold War era can ever come back, or is it permanently a thing of the past?
So I think we'd have slightly different answers to this.
Yes.
Which my 2 cents would be, I'm always very careful to say this. I'm not an astrologer. I didn't predict.
Praveen, you disappointed us.
I didn't predict the end of the Cold War.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a fabulous story of a very eminent American diplomat who went on to hold high office, who I shan't name out of courtesy. But she had done her PhD on the Czechoslovak army on the eve of the disintegration of the state of Czechoslovakia. So just a little warning.
Right.
In my opinion, though, nation states still ally in pursuit of common interests.
Yeah.
Even during the Cold War, these blocs were not monolithic. There were countries within each of those blocs that kind of were slippery from time to time. And I think the idea of standing alone is more a reflection maybe of exaggerated polemical self-importance than of reality. Nation states have to work together, especially nation states that have particular weaknesses or deficits that they need a larger power to address.
Yeah. And Pia, in what way do you disagree with this? Because it seems perfectly reasonable. We all have to work together.
So if I understand this correctly, you're saying that no, we're all not all just working for our own strategic interests.
No, but we are, but together.
Not as isolation really is.
Yes.
Okay, got it. I would sort of agree with that, actually.
Okay.
I would. However, I would say that there is, a lot of emphasis on regional multilateral forums now, SCO, BRICS, and as far as... Yes, Quad as well. Yes. Where, we can use or we can hone our strategic interests in different regional forums.
Right.
And I'm seeing that more and more now. Now, if you don't talk about India, let's say you take Nepal. In fact, the Nepal Prime Minister recently visited in Delhi.
Yes.
It was quite interesting because clearly they have also been trying to tackle the China question when it comes to their relationship with India. So, while we might be stuck between not stuck, but rather strategically placed between the US and Russia, or the West and Russia vis-a-vis the Ukraine war, even a lot of our neighbors are, being quite strategic in how they play the India Big Brother versus China contest. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're also working towards their own strategic interests, but I think they also understand what's good for the neighborhood. There's a larger, certain countries, especially Australia and the ones in Quad, Japan, Philippines as well. There is an understanding of a free and open Indo-Pacific as well.
Right.
So there are certain tenets that maybe democracies can align on much better than other countries.
Okay.
But I would say that there's a lot of fractures also in what we once understood as a unipolar or bipolar world.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, I think maybe they can take this discussion and their disagreements offline now. And alas, it is time for us also to say goodbye to you, to thank you for being with us. Praveen, thank you very much.
Thanks
Pia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will see you again next month, last Thursday of every month. Until July, thank you and goodbye. All right.